Hey, what's up guys? It's your girl Annabelle the Angel back at it with another video. And in today's video, we are going to be doing the second episode of the Angel Astrology School. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the complete Mesopotamian astrology timeline. Okay, guys? So before we get started, I will be looking down. I do have my astrology reference that I am going to be looking at. I feel like eventually I will share all of this information with you guys, but I want to have it like my notes are a little bit all over the place, so I want to have it exactly to go cohesively with the information that I gave with you guys online. So once this whole module on the Mesopotamian astrology is done, then I will release the information on my website. Okay guys, but for now, let's just go ahead and get into it. So if you want to follow me for any more astrology content, I give you guys some very in-depth information. Go ahead and say some stuff in the comments below if you have anything that you want to add to this conversation, and let's go ahead and get into the historical development of Mesopotamian astrology. Okay, so before we get into the actual bread and butter and the actual timeline, I want to go ahead and define a couple of words for you guys, because there's going to be a lot of information that you may not know what it means. And a lot of the times it's like when you're having these educational conversations, they may say some stuff and use some words that you have no idea what it means, but I'm here to define it for you guys, okay? I'm gonna link the article that I got all of this information from. It's this Harvard document that I got this information from. So if you wanna cite and see where I'm at, I'll link it in the description below, okay guys? So these are gonna be a couple of terms that you need to know, okay? So the first one is gonna be the 4 cardinal points. So these are going to be about 90 degrees apart, where the ecliptic cross and the celestial equator, where it reaches the furthest north and south. As defined by the position of the sun, there are equinoxes and solstices. The position of the spring equinox is named the first point of Aries. The latitudes of summer and the winter solstice define the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Okay, second term that I'm going to be defining is heliacal rising. So this is defined as when the constellation first becomes visible, rising the dawn. This has to be coincident with the date when the sun is in the constellation. If the principal stars happen to lie north preceding the center of the constellation, for example, as in the case of Taurus, the Pleiades, and Aries, or it can be a month later depending on the pattern and the brightness of the stars and the tilt of the ecliptic at the season, okay? So the third term that I'm going to be defining is called precession. This is the gradual circling of the Earth's axis around the pole of the ecliptic. It alters the zodiac relation to the seasons at the rate of one constellation every 2,160 years, or 1 degree for every 72 years. The cardinal points have shifted from one constellation to the next in approximately 6,450 BC, 4,380 BC, 2,220 BC, 60 BC, and 2100 AD. But these are only average dates, as the constellations had different and variable sizes and were only assigned equal 30-degree intervals in the 5th century BC for astrological purposes. If a constellation marked a particular month in approximately 1000 BC by the solar position, on average, it would have marked it by the heliacal rising by about 1,000 years earlier. Okay, guys. So now there's going to be 2 different zones that you need to know when it comes to Mesopotamian astrology. So the first zone is going to be the Seleucid zone. So a set of about 12 clay tablets showing the zodiacal signs for astrology. An example of 3 of them survived for the last few centuries. So, for example, these are going to be the signs. Taurus with the Pleiades, Leo with Corvus standing on Hydra, and Virgo with her ear of corn. I will have an episode where I go over all of the constellations, the ancient Mesopotamian constellations, but that's going to be later on. Okay, guys? And so the second is going to be the Dendera zodiac. The only complete map that we have of the ancient sky is from Egypt in the 1st century BC. It shows the classical zodiac surrounded by the Egyptian constellations for the rest of the sky. The zodiacal constellations are not shown in Greco-Roman forms. The shapes of the figures of the Seleucid and the Dendera zodiacs are almost identical to each other and to the boundary stone pictographs from the 2nd millennium BC. So Dendera zodiac seems to be the complete copy of the Mesopotamian zodiac, okay? So when we're going to be referencing these things, we will be going between the Seleucid and the Denderic zodiac, but because it seems to be that the Denderic is the exact copy of the first couple of pages of first couple of tablets of the Seleucid zodiac, it's just assumed that it's going to be the same copy. But again, we don't have the other 9 clay tablets, so it's just presumed. Okay, there will be a Egyptian astrology module, but we're trying to go in timeline order. Okay, guys. So now that I define those terms for you guys, let's get into what this actual episode is about. The historical development of Mesopotamian astrology. Like, I feel like I should have like confetti or something. Okay, so there's going to be about 6 different phases that we're going to have to go through. The first is going to be the early pictograph phase, and that's from 3200 BC to 2100 BC. The second is the boundary stone pictograph phase. This is going to be from 1350 BC to 1000 BC. And these 2 phases show icons of gods which were applied to constellations in divine tradition. The third is going to be the 3 stars each phase, and that's at about 11,000 BC or 1100 BC. 1100 BC. And the fourth is the Mulapin phase. I talked about it in the last episode, guys. So that's from 1100 BC to 700 BC. So these 2 phases provide successive textbooks on constellations. First written records include farming calendar tradition, divine associations of those constellations, which were shared between 2 traditions, thus allowing us also to interpret the icons of the divine tradition. The 5th is going to be the astrometric diaries phase. That's from 750 to 600 BC. Astronomy and astrology matured together, and the first precise and regular records of planetary motions were used in constructing horoscopes. Also, from this period, we have the first surviving pictures of Mesopotamian constellations and the Seleucid and the Denderic zodiacs. And the 6th and the last development of Mesopotamian astrology that we have is the transmission of the zodiacal constellations to the Greeks and a few of the farming calendar constellations of the Arabs. So we're going to go basically in the timeline, and it's important to understand the timeline of this information, because then as I progress into the later chapters and the later modules of different phases of astrology that we have in different cultures, you have to first understand the base. So it's important to understand where Mesopotamian astrology came from and how us as humans evolved over time, where first we were writing in clay tablets, and then in Egyptian astrology, we'll talk about papyrus and hieroglyphics and stuff like that. But a lot of the information from Mesopotamian astrology got transcribed and translated and, you know, kind of put into their own culture in the Greco-Roman Empire. That's going to be later on. I feel like it's more important to do Egyptian astrology first before we get into Greco-Roman, okay? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first phase, which is going to be the early pictographs. That's going to be from about 3200 BC to 2100 BC. Should I say 3200 BC to 2100 BC, okay? The Great Mesopotamian civilizations date back to the Sumerians, okay? So it's important when we are having this to know the timeline of Mesopotamians and who is first in Mesopotamia, because at the end of the day, Mesopotamia had 4 different regions of people that occupied the space. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you guys who were the key people that were living in Mesopotamia during this time, so you can understand and go back in history, go back in the Bible, go back in every type of book that you want to see the type of people that were there occupying Mesopotamia at the time. Because remember, Mesopotamia is modern day Iraq, so it's that region. But when I talk about Sumerians or Babylonians or Akkadians, these are different people that were occupying this space. So for example, let's get into it. The very first people that occupied Mesopotamia was about 10,000 BCE. This was the early settlements. So these were the first human settlements in Mesopotamia, like hunter-gatherers. And if you know anything about history, hunter-gatherers typically wanted to create regions near bodies of water, fresh bodies of water. So rivers, like, you know, the Nile River, everywhere where there's fresh water and vegetation and animals is typically where humans would try to settle. And that's where they would, you know, hunter and gather and that type of stuff. Okay, guys? So that's for a long time period. We're hunter-gatherers for about 7,000 years. So this is like caveman time. Okay, guys? Then we enter the Sumerian period. So this is the very first period. The Sumerians, the ancient Sumerians. And this is from 3,500 to 2334 BC. Okay, and this is the rise of Sumerian city-states like Uruk and Ur. So when we talk about the different gods, their names are these things, because remember, the city-states have the names of the gods. This is during the Sumerian period. Next, the Sumerians were taken over by the thing called Akkadian period, or the Akkadian Empire, and that's from 2334 BCE to 2279 BCE. So Sargon of Akkad, or Akkad, I don't know how to say it, unites Mesopotamia under the First Empire. Okay, so the region. Next, we have the early dynastic period. So it seems to be during the same, that seems to be cohesive with the Sumerian period and also the Akkadian Empire. So it's from 2900 to 2334 BCE. And that's a period of competing city-states in Sumer. So I can just show you guys a map of the different city-states in Sumer, whatever. So after that, following that, we have the Babylonian Empire. It seems to be like a little time period that's missing for about 400 to 500 years. There's a little gap in the history. But we have the Babylonian Empire, and that's from 1894 to 1595. So guys, you guys already know that's in the Bible. That's probably in other pieces of text as well. Do your research. And that's Hammurabi's reign and the Code of Hammurabi. I think I remember reading that in middle school. So after that, following that, we do have another time period gap of about 600 years, and then we get into the Assyrian Empire, okay? So this is from 911 to 612 BCE. This is powerful Assyrian Empire with capital at Nineveh. I remember reading that in the Bible, guys. Nineveh! Okay, then we have the Achaemenid Persian Empire. That's from 539 to 332 BCE. Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon, and Mesopotamia falls under Persian rule. And yeah, and then we get into the Hellenistic period. So this is when the information starts going to more of the Greeks, because remember, Alexander the Great has like a fight with the Persians. I don't remember who was the leader, like Damascus or something. I don't remember. But Alexander the Great conquers Mesopotamia, followed by the Seleucid Empire, aka the Seleucid Dome. Okay, guys. And then we have the Parthian Empire. So that's from 150. Oh, sorry. The Hellenistic period is from 332 to 150 BCE. And then the Parthian Empire is from 150 BCE to 226 BCE. And the Parthians control Mesopotamia. And then the Sassanid Empire is from... Oh, and so I think we're going to stop at the Parthian Empire, because then the Sassanid Empire is AD. So we're doing BCE for now. We'll focus on AD when we get there. Okay? Back to what I was talking about. The first phase of the early pictographs is from 320 or 3200 to 2100 BC. And this is the great Mesopotamian civilizations that date back to the ancient Sumerians, who invented both cities and writing around 3000 BC, or about 3200 BC. And Mesopotamians produced a rich artistic tradition. Okay, guys? They were not scrolling on their phones all day. They were there pondering, creating art, living, probably eating grapes or whatever they were eating over that time. And the artwork at the time includes pottery and carvings, especially seals. So they carved cylinders to be rolled into wet clay tablets to impress the owner's emblems. And they showed naturalistic animals, which were often being either killed by each other or by gods, kings, or heroes. And some common artistic motifs are such as the lion attacking the bull, or two ibixes with a tree, may have had a religious or mythical meaning. So prominent in these artworks are bulls and lions, and sometimes scorpions. These same animals were pictured in the sky as the earliest zodiacal constellations, and those being my lucky, shout out if this is your sign, my lucky Taurus, Leo, and Scorpius, okay? We do not know when these constellations were actually defined, but it was most probably around the same time, so approximately 3200 BC. Although the main importance of the bulls and lions was as real animals and as often as power symbols, some of these figures were decorated with stars and so may have represented the constellations, okay? Moreover, it was just around this time that these constellations plus Aquarius marked the cardinal points of the ecliptic. And they were among the few zodiacal constellations which were invariant in all later Mesopotamian star lists, okay? So although the four cardinal points are commonly thought in relation to the sun, defining the solstices and equinoxes, it requires a rudimentary cosmology to realize that the sun is in a constellation during the day. The early Mesopotamians probably did not have this, and they described the sun god as entering the chamber of the interior of heaven during the night and cutting his way out through the gate on the horizon in the morning. That's honestly so beautiful. Like, okay, so the sun at night, he's entering the interior of heaven, and then in the morning, he's cutting his way through the gate on the horizon in the morning. Like, he's just entering through the gate. Like, oh my God, guys, it's so cute. Okay, sorry. It's like poetic. However, for a people who were clearly interested in the moon and other planets, these would be sufficient to make the cardinal points evident and more important. So even though the sun god was very important, the moon was also very important. We'll also talk about the calendar later on in the calendrical system that they had, because the calendar was really based, they had two calendars, one was based on the sun and one was based on the moon. Okay, so, and during that time, they weren't living, so they were living in cities, but their cities weren't like full of fluorescent lights at night, you know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't have like lamp posts, so they could see the stars clearly. So the constellations were probably like, you know what I'm saying? Okay, anyways. Later artworks showed many animals and gods, some which were clearly identified with heavenly bodies. They often included the symbolic triad of the sun, the moon, and Venus. Two beautiful examples from what is now Iran may show an early stage in this tradition. One is the cylindrical stone jar of 2600 BC, and the other is the seal of 2500 BC. Each shows a splendidly vivacious bestiary and pantheon, including the sun, moon, Venus symbols, and the lion versus bull combat scene with an eagle or man-bull joining in. Between them, they also include the goddess standing on lions, so that may be either Ishtar, Leo, in Virgo. A hunting god with a bow standing on dogs, that's kind of unidentified, perhaps maybe Pavusaj or Sagittarius. A figure showing a stream of two streams of water standing on oxen, so that might be possibly E or Aquarius. And a figure holding two snakes standing on panthers. Probably not Ophiuchus, so it's probably the prototype of Ningizida or Hydra. These scenes may show the beginnings of the zodiacal iconography, which, as we shall see, developed standard symbols for gods, and which were shown in the sky as well in art. It's intriguing that many of these possibly proto-zodiacal artworks came from Elam, Sumer's rival to the east, later part of Persia. That's funny, but it's still modern day Iraq. The earliest bulls and lions proposed by Hartner as astronomical were Elamite, as were two bestiaries cited Adobe. Moreover, as we shall see, original 3-star each list probably had the Pleiades, Leo, Scorpius, and Aquarius listed as stars of Elam, whereas the stars of Akkad and the stars of Amaru included only a few other zodiacal constellations, those being Gemini, Libra, and Cancer, which may, in case, have belonged to the farming calendar tradition at that stage. It might be worth investigating whether the zodiac actually originated from Elam rather than Sumer. So that's something that we have to look at. Was it originally the Elamites? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sumer was conquered by Sargon of Akkad, what I had explained to you guys before, who established the first series of the increasingly great and terrible empires which ruled Mesopotamia. Like I said, the Akkadians from 2334 BC, the Sumerians again from 2150 BC, the Old Babylonians from 1830 BC, the Kassites, I don't know, from 1530 BC, Middle Babylonians from 1125 BC, Assyrians from 729 BC, and the New Babylonians or the Chaldeans from 612 BC, and lastly the Persians from 539 BC. However, the culture of religion, art, and astronomy was a continuous one in spite all of these upheavals. So the passage of knowledge continued despite who was in charge. The Sumerian deities were mostly associated with fertility and animal husbandry. But Akkadian deities were predominantly astral, representing the sun, moon, and stars. In order to unite the country, these deities were combined, and the standard iconography devised so that they could easily be identified visually. The fine seal of Ada illustrates the process, and that's from Thicklum. So, thus from 2300 BC onwards, many seals showed defined figures, including those which became the zodiac, as well as bulls, lions, birds, and other animals. The zodiacal figures do not tend to be grouped together, and there may be no astronomical intent. Rather, in all of the pictographs tradition, we see symbols of gods which were also displayed in the stars. The seal of Ada, or groups together the greatest numbers of gods in archetypal images, which were also the forms most clearly related to the stars, though all of its figures are seen in similar forms on the seals. So these are the first few gods that we see. The first one is going to be E. The beneficent god of earth and life, who dwelt in the abysmal waters, was shown with two streams running under his hands or shoulders. He became Aquarius, and his symbols also formed the constellations of Capricornus. So E's the goatfish, first seen on the seal of just before 2000 BC, so about 4,000 years ago. The field are square of Pegasus, and Pisces or Pisces Austrinus, and perhaps Pisces in Aries. E's ram head staff. Ishtar, queen of heaven, and whore of Babylon, oh my god, goddess of love and fertility in war, was shown with weapons, probably like swords, and lions, and harvest produce. And later, her only astral symbol was planet Venus. But she may have been the origin of the constellations of the bow, which is Canis Major, and Leo and Virgo. Next, we're going to have an unidentified hunting god who carries a bow. And that could perhaps be Palbasag or Sagittarius, modern day Sagittarius. Next, we have the sun god Shamash. And he's shown as a bearded man with rays flaring from his shoulders, cutting his way through the eastern horizon with his characteristic serrated knife. And on the seals of this period, the Sun, Moon, Venus triplet was only occasional. It became frequent on seals from 2100 BC onwards. But from the time onwards, the gods were shown paying more attention to the kings than to the heavens. The Sumerians may have created the other constellations later recorded in Babylon, although there are no surviving written records of most of these before 1100 BC. The Babylons used Sumerian names for many of them. However, this may have been because the Babylons used Sumerian language and script for many of their cultural writings. Sumer was to Babylon as Greece was to Rome. You get it? You get it? You get it? So Sumer was to Babylon as Greece was to Rome. Respected as a source of civilization, even after being absorbed into the empire. So some names might have been invented in Sumerian language in later times. So like I said, you know how Rome basically took all of the Greek culture and like basically upgraded it, tweaked it to fit their lifestyle and aesthetic. That's the same thing that Babylon did to Sumer, okay? So some names may have been invented to the Sumerian language at later times. The cuneiform symbols could be read either as Sumerian words, which are transliterated in capital letters in our tables as in conventional, or as symbols in Babylonian or Akkadian language. written in lowercase. So the decipherment is complicated matter. Many of the constellation names cited herein are going to be in Sumerian. So it's going to be in capital letters to decipher that that's Sumerian, rather than the lowercase letters to decipher that's from Babylonian. So you can kind of understand the two periods. Now, guys, in the next phase, the second phase, I will be in a different location. So see you in a second.